All right, welcome to Hebrew Perspectives, and hopefully we have sound this time. We went through the test, and it seemed like everything was working. We were having a internet connection disconnection thing going on. So here we go. All right. So welcome, Shabbat Shalom, and again, what we do here is we do this on a regular basis every Saturday, every Shabbat. We come together and we study the Torah just like the Messiah and his disciples did. It's a pattern that has been around for thousands of years of reading the same portions of Scripture, studying and talking about those, learning. And of course, they are inexhaustible. The Torah is inexhaustible, and the Torah is the first 5 books of the Bible. It's the foundation of what we learn from, and then everything else builds upon there. So if you look at it, sound is good now, thank you. So if you look at it now, you can see that when you go into the prophets and you go into the writings, you'll see that those confirm the Torah. The Torah is life, and King David talks about it in his Psalm 19, Psalm 119. What does it do? The Torah restores the soul. So it's not something that's done away with. It's something that's forever. So the Torah is forever. You know, you remember, I love advertising. You remember Coke is it? Remember that? Oh, well, Torah is it. All right, that'll be $43 million, please. Thank you. So this week's Torah portion is Vayeitzei. Vayeitzei means "and he left" in the Hebrew. And today we're going to talk about the dust of the earth, the dust of the earth. And Torah Chaim, Torah is life. You know, today is the 7th of December. 2 great things happened. Well, I mean, I say great things, but things that are very, very memorable. That's the word I'm looking for. Thank you for my production assistant. And one is Pearl Harbor, and the other is the birth of my mother-in-law. She loves to watch, and I love having her watch. She's precious to me. So, Pearl Harbor. Yeah. Did you know that Pearl Harbor lasted 1 hour and 15 minutes? And what's interesting about it is that the Japanese, that attack, as horrible as it was, I think it was, I forget the numbers, but it was between 2,000 and 4,000. I don't remember the exact numbers of people that perished during Pearl Harbor, but it was, as Roosevelt said, it was a day that lived in infamy, FDR. And so, but it wasn't a very good attack. Even though it was very destructive, it did not take out the majority of the fleet, because the fleet was out in doing maneuvers out in the water. This is why America was able to respond in such a quick fashion and start making its way and entering into World War II. But anyway, today is December 7th. So we remember all the lives that were lost during that. You ever get a chance to go out and see the USS Arizona? It's a testimony of what happened there. It's still under the water. So, now, let's get into it here today. Let's start out with the blessing that we do before Torah study. There's one thing, it's like going back to what we do here, and I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this because we really like to get into the fact that we're presenting something from a Hebrew perspective. I know many of the audience that watches this program, you have people of all different kinds of beliefs and walk in how they found the Messiah and things like that. basic Christianity, Hebrew roots people, Messianic Jews, Jewish people. So and all kinds of people are watching this program. But for mostly what we're trying to do is we're trying to make a connection of how the Jewish faith, how it can help Christianity and build it up. And I don't want to go into a lot of details on that, but that's basically we're trying to make connections here. And it's more than just an educational thing. We share the commandments on a regular basis, and we've been digging into that on a daily basis. And it's for the purpose. It's putting out there so that we have an understanding where we can make we take the physical aspect of a commandment and we connect it with the spiritual. The physical doesn't go away. When I started following the Messiah, I didn't become some mystical spiritual being all of a sudden flying around. No, I'm still very physical. I still have to connect in physical ways to the spiritual. I still have to somehow connect with God and bring heaven to earth. And I have to connect myself in turn, connect with heaven and make that connection. And that is through physicality, through connection. So even something as simple as prayer, people seem to think that prayer is this lofty spiritual thing, and it is. It really is. But it is still a physical thing that we do that helps us to connect with that spiritual. So we cannot have one without the other. And what is that phrase that you hear in Christianity? Be so heavenly minded that you're no earthly good. Okay, that's that. There's a lot of that. All right, so we got a lot to cover here, and then we're gonna have fun with this. All right, we're gonna have fun, and you're going to enjoy it. All right, so blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us with his commandments and has commanded us to engross ourselves in the words of Torah. Please, Lord our God, sweeten the words of Torah in our mouth and in the mouth of your people, the family of Israel. May we and our offspring, the offspring of your people, all of us know your name and study your Torah for its own sake. Blessed are you, Lord, who teaches Torah to his people Israel. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who selected us from all the peoples and gave us his Torah. Blessed are you, Lord, giver of the Torah. As the blessing says, may Torah study always be sweet to you. Now, before we dig in, I want to address one thing. Many people, as I share some of these on a daily basis, I share the daily aliyah, and what we are reading that day. It's what the Messiah and his disciples would have been reading. So, and oftentimes I get people, like I said, many different people watch these programs, many different people interact with the Facebook page. And there's one thing I want to make clear, and this is a fact, okay? Now, you heard me just say the prayer that has been said for thousands of years before a Torah study, and I use the word Lord. Lord is it's not a replacement. Adonai is not a replacement. It's not the name, but it's representative of the name. Why? Because we do not pronounce that name. There are some in my audience that go around and they want to pronounce that name. Let me tell you, and I'm going to be very blunt, you do not know how to pronounce the name. So please stop trying to pronounce the name. This is a fact. It's the way it is. It's just the way of life. And it's not up for debate. It's not up for debate. And we do not, one of the things that we've started from the very beginning when I started Hebrew Perspectives is that, and I hate to take the time to clarify these things, but it has to be done every once in a while. We do not debate here. I'm going to present you with vetted resources, historical facts, and most of all, the Torah, which is the truth. And it's all about Yeshua. It's all about the living Torah. It's all about our Messiah. He's the living Torah. And there's people on the other side that have trouble with that as well. people don't want to accept who he is, but that's just the way it is. But again, we do not debate about this. We are Hebrew Perspectives, and we are going to continue to do what we've been doing. Some people may not like it, and there's places that you can go on the internet and debate all day long. You can be a keyboard warrior all you want, but it really it really doesn't. It's really not productive.
Dialogue discussion's good.
It's really not productive at all. All right, so as I like to often do, I'd like to start with Rabbi Twersky's Living Each Day. Actually, before we do that, we are going to we are going to pray for my father. We're going to pray for my dad. All right. My dad, he fell. He couldn't get up. He ended up in the hospital. Hashem was sending refuah shlema, a speedy recovery. He is at home. He is doing better, but we still want a speedy recovery. So we're going to pray for him right now real quick, all right? Is that okay? All right. Master of the universe, with your compassion, grant us the physical strength, health, and ability so that we may function effectively, and may we experience no illness or pain. Enable us to serve you in joy, contentment, and health. Save us from all evil and prolong our days in goodness and our years in sweetness. Enrich our years and add to our days and years of dedicated service to you. Shield us in the shadow of your wings and spare us and all our family from all harsh or evil decrees. May we be at rest and calm, vigorous and fresh, and serve and revere you. And we ask for a refuah shlema, a speedy recovery for my dad, for Walter Roy Johnson. All right, thank you. And I hope he's watching. He and Cindy have been watching, and we're grateful for that. So that's why we like to like and share these videos, and subscribe to YouTube when you can, to grow. All right, so let's go to Rabbi Twersky, and it is the 6th of Kislev, the Hebrew month of Kislev, and now from the daily Amidah, which is the standing prayer, you'll notice that behind me I have that, it's a pulpit, lectern, has this, you do Torah scroll. It was a gift from my late father-in-law, blessed memory. When we lived in St. Jewish Park, he found it, and it's been with us ever since. It's a cherished piece. And anyway, but when you do the Amidah, it's a standing prayer. That's why Amidah is standing, and it means that you're standing. So when you begin the Amidah, the tradition is you take 3 steps back, then you take 3 steps forward, and you begin as if you're walking into the presence of God. You're walking into the presence, and now you're bringing your petitions before God. And then there's 18 benedictions. Actually, there's 19. There was a 19th one added later. And that you go through in the standing prayer. And oftentimes this is done in silence. When you go to shul, when you go to synagogue, it's done in silence. It's a personal time with God. So in part of the Amidah, it says, you favor man with perception and teach man moral insight. O favor us with perception, insight, and wisdom from you. Blessed be you, God, gracious giver of perception. This is important, right? All right, so, as I was saying, it says here, Rabbi Twersky says, the above prayer is the first supplication of the daily Amidah, taking precedence even over requests for life and health. It is also known as Havdalah, the prayer of distinction, wherein we pray for the wisdom to distinguish good from evil and right from wrong. Havdalah is what we will do tonight. We light a candle and we do a separation of distinction. We're leaving the holy and having to go back to the mundane. And we mark that time, and it's a remembrance. That's why the Shabbat is such a cherished time of connecting with the eternal. And it's a time of peace and love, So Tversky says, an existence that is without the capacity to perceive the real nature of things, the insight to understand how things relate to one another, and the wisdom to apply what we have learned is not the kind of existence a person should seek. Perception, insight, and wisdom are the first order of business. This is something that my wife and I, we pray on a regular basis. We want the wisdom, the insight, the understanding. It helps us out. I'm sorry. I saw my mother-in-law. It's on page 69. Many people have this same book. As a matter of fact, the one I have, I think I stole from her shelf. And then I found another one, and I think I had like 3 or 4 of them around. And then when she came for a visit, I said, "Here, you can have the newer one back." But anyway, all right. So let's get to it. All right. Now I'm going to have to look at my notes real close, because what was happening was I started writing, and then all of a sudden I realized that I needed some spots in my notes to go back to, and all of a sudden I was writing really little to fit things in. And oftentimes when I do that, I end up forgetting things, and I don't want to forget anything today. I want to make sure that we cover a lot of this. All right, so here we go. All right, so we're going to start with, I have this book. This is actually a book in a huge series, and it's called the Torah Anthology. It's by Mayam Loez, and it goes through the whole Torah. So this is just the 3rd book dealing with just the 12 tribes, and it's chock full of insights, and we're going to start with that. And we are going to, in your Chumash, if you have your Chumash with you, if you want to follow along, we will be, it's Genesis 28 and 14. Genesis 28 and 14. And so this is the story where, Jacob lays down, he puts stones around his head, he dreams and he sees a ladder, and behold, God's standing over him, and then he's promising him about the ground that he's lying on. And in verse 14 he says, "Your offspring shall be as the dust of the earth, and you shall spread out powerfully westward, eastward, northward, and southward, and all the families of the earth shall bless themselves by you and by your offspring." So, before I get into, I ran across, I did just grab one last little insight just before we had come on, and I happened to notice in my book that I've got here, Patuke Chotam, he goes through the Torah portions, and I went to this particular spot to see what he had to say, and going back to, he talks about the land upon which you are lying on. He's talking about the land is actually, he says, it's the Shekinah. So, and basically what happens is that the Shekinah, remember we taught this before, and you can see this throughout rabbinic literature, through the sages, that the Shekinah is in exile with us. So we are in exile, we're waiting for redemption, and the Shekinah, if you did not ever realize this, really, the Shekinah is a manifestation of God, all right? And so, but we don't believe in a Trinity. There's only God. That's not up for debate as well. And many people get stuck on that, and they end up going off into the swamp and all of that, and what happens is nothing ever gets accomplished. We're arguing over those things all the time. But it's interesting here, he says, the land refers to the Shekinah, the land of the living. The land of the living. One day, one day I'm going to be in Jerusalem. I'm going to be in the land of the living. And you know what? And I hope to stand on the very spot where he laid down. You know what's interesting is that according to Rashi, where it says the land upon which you are lying, when you look at it, when you can ask the question, it's like, wait a minute, are you talking about, what land are you talking about? Are you land about just the little piece that I'm laying here on? You know, kind of like, you know, you only cover a certain area, you know, it's like, but the point is that according to Rashi, he was talking about the whole land, everything that is promised to Israel was contracted into that very spot. And he understood what that meant, because then he continues to go on and say, you know, it goes out. So now, in order to rectify his soul, a person must entrust it to the Shekinah when he lies down to retire at night. This is why we say the Shema at night. Shema Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. We are declaring that he is the one true God, and we're doing this just before we go to sleep, because we are entrusting our soul to God, that he will allow us to wake up. And then in the morning we say Modeh, I thank you. I thank you for waking me up again. All right, so okay, so let's get to, I would say, Me'am Loez. All right, so your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth. You shall break out to the west, to the east, to the north, and to the south. Through you and your offspring shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Now, in the Hebrew, the word yam in there is that word west. It actually talks about, it also means the sea. Yam means the sea. You shall, let's see, so the verse can be read as, you shall break out to the sea. So what is exactly to the west of Israel and Jerusalem? It's the sea, right? All right. And so God said to Jacob, through your merit, the Red Sea will split when your descendants leave the land of Egypt. So this was a prophetic thing, which God was hinting to Jacob. Here, what I think people don't realize is that Jacob is the third of the patriarchs. He was like a king. He was very much like a messianic figure. Although we tend to really look at Joseph more, because Joseph is a huge picture of a messianic figure because of the suffering Messiah, and Joseph suffered. But Jacob is more like, he's kind of like King David. He's kind of, he has more king, he's more of a king. Although Joseph was the ruler in the land as well. He was a king as well. And so, but it says here, so through you and your offspring shall all the families of the earth be blessed. When people wish to bless each other, they will say, may you be like Jacob and his children. Now, we all want that kind of blessing, don't we? All right, so before we go back to the ladder, let's look at let's see here. Why did I have, again, here's my notes. All right, so here this is another one of these things where, and I think I pointed this out not too long ago. Remember how Jewish people are scattered everywhere in the world? For one, so that they, you know, you can't, they can't be wiped out, because for some reason everyone wants to kill not everyone, but you know, I'm just saying, people want to, it's just, and you have to ask your question, why? Why do people want to do away with the Jewish people? Why are the Jewish people attacked at all times? It's because, again, we mentioned this before, that they bring a conscience into the world. People don't want to have a conscience. They want to be able to do whatever they want to do. So, but the point is that scattered for two reasons. For one, for safety, and then the second is that Torah influence can affect all of the world, everywhere in the world. So that is why they're scattered. So let's see here. Now I mentioned the Amidah and and the Shemoneh Esrei is the 18 benedictions. That's what Shemoneh Esrei. And so, and I found something interesting. It talks about here. It has to go with the dust of the earth that is mentioned in 28:14, and it talks about absolute selflessness. And here, this is interesting because this goes back to Abraham, all right, the first patriarch. And let my soul be like dust to everyone. So what does this mean? The dust of the earth is the epitome of selflessness. And that's what Abraham was. He was the epitome of selflessness. He was all about, does everyone remember? Chesed. Chesed is loving kindness. That is what he was known for, was his loving kindness. Isaac was known for strength. Jacob for Torah. All right, these things are needed. These things are needed in life, and we have to bring them all together. We have to bring the patriarchs together, and then as we learn here, we'll see as we go through the 12 tribes, everything that each one of the 12 tribes we learn and we gain things and how to live our lives, how to live a Torah life from those as well. So the dust of the earth is the epitome of selflessness. Everyone steps on it and crushes it underfoot. You ever heard about, basically being trampled like dust? Isn't that what's happened to the Jewish people for many, many years? Being trampled, no matter where they went. So, everywhere, anywhere we went, right? Some people think that they know what persecution is. They really do not. Unless you're living a Jewish life, you really, really don't understand. So anyway, yet the dust and the soil take no offense and continue to give forth a rich bounty of produce. Wow. Think about that. So we are dust of the earth. We are dust of the earth. And what do? We give forth something that gives life. All right? Torah is life. Okay? So what happens when we plant a seed and we add water? What is water again? Water is also is the Torah. Just as much as we need water to live, you can't go without water for more than 3 days. This Torah that's why Torah is related to water, because you cannot go without it. You cannot go without it. You have to have it. You mix it with the dirt, and then what do? You can build things. The water is as fluid as it is. Torah is fluid as it is, brought together with dust. And what was man made from? Adam was made from the dust of the earth. And the Torah, again, we've said this many times, and the sages say this, the Torah is God. So God put himself, so to speak, into the dust to create man in his image. It makes sense, doesn't it? It doesn't. Some of this stuff gets very esoterical, gets very deep, but a lot of it's very, very simple. And what does that bring? It brings a rich bounty of produce into our lives. Produce fine character. So in the first blessing of the Amidah, we cite the example of Abraham, who was utterly selfless. And he said, I am but dust and ashes, in Genesis 18:27. In this merit, God promised Abraham, and I shall make your seed like dust of the earth, Genesis 13:16. So you can see the connection there. Now, according to Cephas Emes, he explains that God promised Abraham that his descendants would be as selfless as dust and emulate his example in sincere humility. So this is one of the things that we have to have as believers in the Messiah, following the Torah, following the commandments. We have to be an example of humility, of sincere humility. And that's hard for some people. It can be hard for any of us. but it's something that we have to work on. It's something that's part of our life. So, thus the Shemoneh Esrei, the Amidah, the 18 blessings, begin with the merit of Abraham, who surrendered to God like dust. And it concludes with the pledge that Abraham's descendants will be as numerous as the dust. This fulfills the words of King Solomon, who said, "All come from dust, and all shall return to dust." Ecclesiastes 3:20. If you've ever been to a funeral, you'll hear someone say, "Ashes to ashes, dust to dust." Yes, that's a Jewish concept. It came from this. All right. Now, Ayun Tefillah explains this prayer for self-effacing humility. That's what this prayer is for. It's for self-effacing humility. Everyone uses the dust of the earth, yet no one pays attention to it. It is taken for granted. Similarly, one should not seek credit for his good deeds and should shun attention and accolades. The less a person cares about his prestige, the less he will let selfishness interfere with his service to God and his efforts for self-improvement. So and then you can go, if you want to read more on this, you can go to the Tosafot, and you can go to Barachot 17a and read more about it. And there's more about, if you continue to read on here, this is the importance of Torah study. This is the importance of Torah study. We get into where we start praying to open my heart to your Torah. King Solomon relates the Torah to wisdom. If you are not opening your heart to Torah, you are not opening your heart to wisdom. Let me say that again. If you are not opening your heart to Torah, you are not opening your heart to wisdom. Do we need wisdom? Yes, we do. Why does it say? Because we perish for the lack of wisdom, the lack of knowledge. And it's connected with what? With keeping the commandments of God, following the commandments of God. Many people forget to read the next scripture after that. But the point is that, so for example, I posted basically something about Torah to a well-known page just to share it on the daily study, and it was declined. And it said that it was declined because of key words. What were the key words? Everything was biblical. Everything that was in there was biblical. So why was it declined? I'm waiting for an answer. But you know what? I'm not going to fret over it. Because what is this thing here? I'm not looking for accolades. I'm just trying to scatter the Torah wherever I can, so that it can help people to come to an understanding and help improve lives. We all want to improve. We all want to improve. We do. All right. Let's go to, before we go back to Me'am Loez, I've got the Hebrew Gospels. And we're going to go to Matthew chapter 10. And we're going to read a very familiar story. Matthew chapter 10, and he called to his 12 disciples and gave them authority over spirits of impurity. What was impurity in biblical times? Impurity was coming in contact with the dead, coming in contact with what is commonly translated as leprosy, but actually is people that had zerat because of their evil tongue, talking bad about people, lashon hara, gossiping, slandering, put out of the camp because of it, and it would start showing. It started showing in their house. We learned about this sometime back. It would show in the walls of their house first, kind of giving them a warning. It's like, hey, you need to watch what you're saying. And then if you continued to go on to that, then all of a sudden it came to your skin. That is an impurity. Now, so he's giving authority over spirits of impurity to drive them out and heal every sickness and disease. So he's giving authority for them to go, and he explains here what happens. But before he does, let's see, he says here, this is something interesting. he says, these are the names of the 12 shlachim. These are the apostles, the apostles, the sent ones, so to speak. The first is Shimon, who is called Petros, and his brother Andre, Yaakov ben Zavdi, and his brother Yochanan, Philippos and Bartalmei, Toma and Mattai, the tax collector, Yaakov ben Chalfi, and Labai, who is known as Taddai, Shimon HaKaneh, and Yehuda ish Kriot, his betrayer. Now, you commonly know all of these names in the Greek because you read the Greek New Testament, and there's Peter, James, John, Bartholomew. You understand all that, right? Those are the Greek names, but those are the Hebrew names. So it says in verse number 5, it says, Yeshua sent out these 12 and commanded them, saying, all right, do not go on the road to the Gentiles, and do not enter any towns of the Shomronim. That is the Samaritans. Okay, that's the Samaritans. Go to the lost sheep of the house of Yisrael. As you go, call out, saying, the kingdom of heaven is at the brink of revival. All right, we've talked about this before. What does that mean? That is a euphemism to return to Torah. That is a euphemism to return to the foundation of Torah. Basically, it's a preaching of people need to do teshuvah, repentance, and turn back to the teachings of God. All right? Again, this is because people weren't heeding this message. 40 years later, what happened? The temple was destroyed. Okay? Now, then he commands in verse number 8, he says, heal the sick, purify the metzarim, that is the leprous ones, raise the dead, and drive out the demons. Freely you have taken, freely you shall give. Do not take gold or silver or copper in your belts. Why is he sending them with so little? It's a picture of being in exile. Remember what he said? He said to let me make sure I get to what it said. Foxes have holes, and I'm forgetting what it is. You know what I'm talking about. He's basically when somebody wanted to follow him, and he mentions that, but he says I don't have anywhere to lay my head. Basically, that is that comes from Jewish literature as well. It's talking about being in exile. Matthew 8:20. Thank you. Matthew 8:20. So being in exile. All right. So that's what it's talking about. You want to follow the Messiah, you are going to follow him into exile. What did we just talk about earlier about who is also in exile with us? The Shekinah. So the Messiah was saying that he was the Shekinah manifest. Okay, this is not difficult stuff. All right. This is why we study these things that we study. This is why we bring out the vetted sources of thousands of years, because they are valid. They help us. All right, so do not take gold or copper in your belts, or a sack for the road, or a second tunic, or shoes, or a staff, since it is appropriate for a worker to receive enough for his living. Whatever town or village you enter, seek out who is worthy within it, and remain there until you leave. I think a lot of Christians would have a problem with that phrase right there today. What would that... You've heard the phrase, you've got to get good to get God. You don't have to get good to get God. Have you ever heard a Christian say that? You don't have to get good to get God? Here the Messiah is saying, I want you to find people that are worthy to receive this message. What's it talking about? It's talking about hungry sparks of holiness that actually want that wisdom, that want that Torah. They may be God-fearers. We've mentioned before what a God-fearer is. A God-fearer is someone, they come around, they're interested in the Jewish things, they love the Torah study, they love the insights, they want to be around it. Sometimes they don't fully embrace it all, though. But eventually, a lot of God-fearers do embrace it, and they do follow Messiah. But yes, there is a certain amount of worthiness in taking on the Torah. When you come to the house, ask of its shalom. Shalom is peace, right? But it's also the name of God. You come in and shalom in this house. Shalom, just saying that in a Jewish household means that we're trying to follow the Torah here. All right? It will be that if the house is worthy, your shalom will come upon it. You'll be able to teach about the peace of God, and they'll embrace it, and they'll say, yes, we need to return to God. I've been around people this has happened many, many times. I'll be working alongside somebody, and they'll, I don't come out and present who I am or what I do, anything like that, just because of my lifestyle and how I do certain things. It isn't long before they ask the question, are you a believer of God somehow? Okay, so it comes out. And at that point, as I'm working with that individual, even if they do not fully embrace everything that I begin to teach them, because now they are open, they're wanting to learn something, many of them come to that point of being a God-fearer. They're like, I really do need to turn my life around. I really do need to change some things in my life, okay? That is the kind of perception, that is the kind of people you end up working with, all right? Now, if anyone does not receive you or listen to your words, leave that house and that town and shake the dust off your feet. The dust. I don't think this is any accident that this is what is the whole dust off the feet thing. Okay, remember what he said in the beginning of this. He said, don't go to the area of the Gentiles. Why is that? When you do research, that you find that when Jewish people would avoid Gentile areas at that time, why? Because if you came in contact with the dead, you became impure. What happens when you become impure? Again, we know it. You get put outside and you can't do anything within the camp. It's like you're in timeout. You don't want to be in timeout. The Jewish people at that time did not want to be in timeout. They wanted to follow after the things of God. Now, were they always perfect? No. Were there some hypocritical? Yes. And that's just the way it was. We deal with the same things nowadays. We deal with the same thing. But the point is here is that going into Gentile, you didn't know where bodies were buried. You don't know where the filth was that would cause you to be impure. You didn't know if someone who may reach out and just slap you on the back, how you doing, Mr. Jew? He may have been leprous. I mean, you didn't know. Now you become impure. So you see what I'm saying here? He's giving specific instructions. And what does a lot of that have to do? It has to do with the dust of the earth. Now, in some ways, did this get taken a little bit overboard where you don't venture out? Of course, we have the Messiah talking of the story of the Good Samaritan, right? Where is the victim? He's in the dust of the road, okay? And no one will help him, but a Samaritan helps him. He's talking about those hypocrites that wouldn't help, right? Again, another example of people being so heavenly minded they're no earthly good. So there's everywhere. It's everywhere, all right? So, but amen, I say to you, it will be easier for the land of Sodom and Gomorrah on the day of judgment than for that town. All right? Here we go. Back to Me'am Loez. All right. I'm looking at my notes. Oh, yeah. There we covered a lot of that. Yes, we covered a lot of that. Okay. So now, let's go back to the ladder. Let's go back to the ladder. Now, Me'am Loez talks about, he says, the ladder that Jacob saw was also symbolic of Israel's future. God thus disclosed to Jacob the entire future of the Jewish nation. The ladder symbolizes the great altar that stood in the holy temple in Jerusalem. That word for ladder, sulam, can also be like a staircase, so to speak. And although it stood on the ground, its head was in the heaven. So when Jacob saw that ladder, it was standing on the ground, but he couldn't see how far up it went. All right? It went up into the heavens and kind of disappeared. The fragrance of the sacrifices would ascend on high, and God would cherish them very much. The angels ascending and descending allude to the Kohen, the priests, who would offer the sacrifices, climbing to the top of the altar and going back down again. All right. The ladder also symbolized the revelation at Sinai. This is what happened. What was the revelation at Sinai? It was Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah, the giving of the law of Moses at Mount Sinai. And the fact that the Torah would be brought down from heaven there, the numerical value of the Hebrew word for ladder, that remember we said that's sulam, that is 130. The same as that for Sinai, Mount Sinai. Sinai is 130. Interesting, right? The angels allude to Moses and Aaron, who ascended to heaven and descended with the Torah. All right? They are properly referred to as angels of God, since prophets are also called angels. The Hebrew word for angel is what? Malach. Malach. And that also means messenger. So Moses and Aaron were messengers. All right, so here we go. Now we're going to skip ahead a little bit because we want to, I don't remember when we started, and I don't seem to have a timer on. All right, so bear with me. We're going to get through this, and we had a late start, but let's jump to chapter 29 and verse number 24. 29 and verse number 24. Laban gave his servant Zilpah to his daughter Leah as a handmaid. Zilpah was younger than Bilhah. In order to fool Jacob, Laban gave Leah, the younger one, Zilpah. He would think that he was with Rachel, since the younger servant was usually given to the younger daughter. Now, if you remember the story, Laban, that trickster, he makes the switch. He's giving Leah instead of Rachel. And remember, they're twins. Rachel and Leah were twins. This was a very common thing in the Torah in the beginning. Many people looked alike, so to speak, because a lot of them were twins. In other words, Abel had a twin, Cain had a twin, and some of the twins were, it was triplets, one of them. But in other words, it was, and then some of them were sisters. So, but anyway, this happened often, where there were twins or triplets, and so that's where you get a lot of the looking alike, so to speak. And it was a very common thing. Remember, people lived a long time back then. Think about it, how people don't like that word evolution, but things kind of evolved and changed, and breeding, so to speak. I hate using that word. You understand what I'm trying to say, is that basically over a time, cultures mixed with each other, and the variants started producing different likenesses, right? And what's interesting is that you can still have twins and triplets today. My cousin Shane, he had, but it always happens. It's like his wife was having trouble, and so they basically had to go get some help. I forget what they call that, but anyway, instead of having one baby, they ended up having triplets, and it actually happened with our son as well. Our Cohen and Corbin, our precious grandsons. I just love them. Anyway, and our granddaughter Chloe. Anyway, I'm getting distracted. All right, so I get easily distracted. All right, so Rachel heard what was happening, and she said, "How can I make believe that I know nothing and allow my sister to be embarrassed to death? If Jacob asks her for the secret password, she will now know what to answer, and he will refuse to touch her. I might as well kill her." With that, Rachel told Leah the secret countersign. All right, so now, according to the sages, and what we're reading here is Ma'am Loez talks about this, is that what it comes down to is that Rachel knew what was happening. She saw what her father was doing. People don't go against their parents, okay? She saw what her father was doing. She saw that Leah was being put through that. So she had to help in the deception. Why did she help in the deception? To save her sister embarrassment. Now, it is Torah. It's Torah. Shaming is a sin against the Torah. So she was trying to avoid shaming her sister. Okay? And so basically the Torah talks about do not embarrass anyone in public. And basically there is the Hebrew word is lahaben panim, or what that means is to make the face go white. Remember, the Hebrew language is a very concrete language, what you can see, taste, feel. You know, it's what you can grasp a hold of. Very different than Greek. This is why we go back to the Hebrew as well, because, you know, like if I'm angry at you, you can see it in my nose. The nose, anger, right? It's concrete. You can see it. Again, more physical connection to spiritual connections. All right, so we understand that. So it's a color draining from the face. All right, it's linked to the commandment, "Thou shalt not murder." Why? Because shaming someone is like spilling their blood. It's as if you killed them. It's like you killed them. Okay. All right, so now let's get to the meat of this. We wanted to talk about the dust of the earth, of course, and let's talk about the birth of the tribes. Now, remember we read in the Gospel of Matthew chapter 10, we lists off 12 disciples, right? And some of those disciples, like Shimon, Peter, Shema, here. It's a root here, right? All right, so and there's a Yehuda in there, and so you can see there's some connections in there on that. So if we go to verse 32 of chapter 29, we're going to start walking through each one of these. All right. So Leah became pregnant and gave birth to a son. All right, let's remember something here, and if you can go back and watch last year's video as I went more into detail about this, but basically Leah, remember we were talking about the matriarchs were all, and I think we talked about this recently in the barrenness. Was it last week? I think it was last week. Barrenness in each one of the matriarchs severs the connection of the old and begins anew. This is new life being created. All right, so you would get the impression that Leah wasn't barren, but she was up until a certain point. And the sages tell you that she was barren up until what she did was when she was praying to God to not be married to Esau. Remember, we talked about this last year in last year's video. We went more into depth on this. She was the older sister destined to marry the older brother, Esau. Remember, Jacob did the whole flip-flop thing, right? So he's going to end up marrying Leah, all right? So you can see how these things work out. And Rachel was meant to marry Jacob. You know, you know what I'm saying? But it says that her eyes were soft. And the sages will tell you that her eyes were soft because she was crying out to God. This is why she's such a spiritual being. This is why she is buried in Machpelah with all of the other patriarchs and matriarchs. And later on we learn, I don't know if we talked about it last year, I think we did, as to why Rachel is not there. But we won't go into that because we're doing the 12 tribes. But what I wanted to point out is that she was the first one to not be barren because of her prayer. Remember we talked about last week? God causes that barrenness. Why? So that we'll call out to him. So that we'll reach down deep within us and get a hold of something and get a hold of God so that we can get what we need. She named him Reuben, right? As she said, God has seen my humiliation. Now my husband will love me. All right? So Reuben means see a son. Is, it's coming, remember we have a Torah portion called Reah, see, to see, right? Reuben literally means see a son, right? Now, Leah had two reasons for giving him this name. First, she is quoted in the Torah, God has seen my humiliation. Now my husband will love me. I trust that just as you saw my humiliation and suffering, so you will see the persecutions of my children when they are in exile. Now, the reason why it's saying this like this is because just like Sarah, just like Rebecca, Leah was considered a prophetess. She saw things prophetically, and she saw things of the future. She saw that Jacob was going to have 12 tribes, and she becomes a major part of it. All right? She produces most of the children of the 12 tribes. Okay? Now, Reuben, they will see a son. Let all the forces on high see my son and watch over him and his children. The second reason was prophetic. Reuben can also be read as Reuben, see between. She said, see the difference between my son and the son of my mother-in-law. She was speaking of Esau and who wanted to kill Jacob for making him sell his birthright. Remember, Jacob's children, the tribes of Israel, they become Israel, the tribes of Israel. What does Esau's descendants become? If you read in throughout rabbinic literature, you'll see that they go to a place called Italia. The descendants they become Romans. Okay, so you can see that Jacob is always fighting with his brother Esau. All right? So she was speaking of Esau who wanted to kill Jacob for making him sell his birthright. Prophetically, she saw that Joseph would also take the birthright from Reuben, but Reuben would not even be jealous of his younger brother. These names were actually determined by providence. God placed the words in the parents' mouths so that each child would be given a name appropriate to his destiny. These names are not by accident. Remember, names are important. Some say that Leah conceived on the very first night. If a man had intercourse with his wife and thinks of another woman, I'll say we're never going to go into that. Okay, so now let's go to the next one, verse number 34. No, not 34. Verse 33. She became pregnant again and had a son. She said, God heard, Shema, that I was unloved, and he also gave me this one. She named him Simeon. Simeon, or Shimon in the Hebrew, like we just said, means hear. She said, may God also hear my descendants' prayers when they are persecuted in Egypt. Simeon was born on the 28th of Tevet. Now, verse 34. Simeon, so basically with Reuben, we that's where faith comes in. We all come to that point of faith, the firstborn, faith, right? Then Simeon, through hearing, we get understanding, right? We understand. So the Shema isn't just about hearing, it's about taking it in and understanding, right? So now, verse 34, she became pregnant again and had a son. She said, this time my husband will become attached, lava, to me, since I have given him 3 sons. He therefore named him Levi. There's a reason why it says he there, all right? Levi comes from the root lava, meaning to accompany or to be a companion. Literally, Leah said, my husband will become a companion to me. Leah knew that Jacob would have 12 sons from his 4 wives. She therefore said, now that I have 3 sons, I have completed my portion. I hope that the divine presence will be his companion and accompany lava. It also means to cling. Okay? So, We have faith, we have understanding, and we have a love of God, clinging to God, grabbing a hold of God, clinging to him. Now, as far as that he part, what we were just talking about, God sent the angel Gabriel and named him Levi. The Torah therefore says, he therefore named him and not she named him, as with all the other tribes. So this is why Levi ends up being a very special tribe. We get Moses and Aaron and the priests, right? All right. Verse number 35. She became pregnant again and had a son. She said, this time let me praise God and therefore name him Judah, Yehuda. She then stopped having children. Okay? Now, Yehuda in the Hebrew comes from the root word yada, which means to thank. Again, like we say, Modeh ani in the morning. Modeh ani lefaneka melech b'chayam shaharta sadbi neshamati v'hemla rabba amunateka. I thank you, my King, for so gracefully returning my soul within me. Great is your faithfulness. That part, Modeh ani, I thank you. All right, we are grateful people. That is the core of, we're grateful for the Torah, grateful for everything that God has given us. Leah's statement can be understood through a parable. A Cohen priest was in the field. One man came along and gave him a large basket full of teruma, tithe. But the Cohen priest did not thank him at all. Then another man gave him a small measure of grain, and the Cohen thanked him profusely. But I gave you a large basketful, said the first man. Why didn't you thank me too? You didn't even say thank you. When another man came along and gave you a very small measure of wheat, you thanked him graciously. You gave me your tithe, replied the Kohen. If you hadn't given it to me, you would have given it to another priest. The other man gave me his own wheat. Does this sound familiar? Does this sound like a story that we hear, a parable of the Messiah talking about? But the little widow that gives all she has, everything. Yes, God provided it for her, but she gave everything she had. All right, does it sound familiar? Right. So Leah knew that Jacob had 4 wives and was destined to have 12 sons. According to this, her rightful share was therefore 3 sons. But now that she had a 4th son, God had given her more than her due. This was a far greater divine kindness than even the fact that she had her children before Rachel. She therefore felt obliged to thank God in a special way. So that's where Yehuda comes from. And again, I want to point out, this is another thing that is not debatable. It is a fact that cannot be debated. Hebrew, Jew, Israelite are all synonymous terms. And the reason why we say this is, what did it say on that sign over the Messiah? It said, the King of the Jews, right? Okay, who are the Jews? Not, are they just from the line of Judah? No. The Bible is replete with other examples of people that were called Jews. As a matter of fact, Mordecai, in the story of Esther, is a Benjamite. Why? The individual tribes weren't known as their individual names. They were known by Yehuda, the thankful ones. Why? Because he was the line of the king. Everyone is called Jews in the line of the king. So she said, I must thank him all the more. I see that this son will give rise to the royal line. His descendant will be the great King David, who will thank God and praise him. The Talmud notes that since the time of creation, no one had thanked God until Leah did so. Okay, listen to this. So we do find others that praised God earlier. Noah said, "Blessed be God, the Lord of Shem," in Genesis 9:26. Melchizedek, or Shem, he said, "Blessed be God Most High," in chapter 14, verse 20. Abraham's servant said, Eliezer, he said, "Blessed be God, Lord of my master Abraham," back in chapter 24, verse 27, when his prayer was answered. Remember that? Still, they did not actually say that they were thanking God. They blessed God in thanks, but they did not actually thank him in so many words. Leah did so because she now knew that she would be worthy of more than her sisters and have more children than any of them. As we read along, you find that she has 2 more. All right. 11:20. Let's see here. So how far are we in? 4? All right. So we have faith, we have understanding, we have love for God, and we have thankfulness. What is in that thankfulness? It's commitment. It's commitment, right? All right. So I hate to hurry along, but let me see here. Okay, so Rachel, so we jump to chapter 30. Rachel is kind of upset. She gets upset with Jacob. You know, she give me children. She, you know, and she's upset, right? Okay, and then so what does Rachel do? Rachel takes an example from Sarah, and she says, "Here's my handmaid Bilhah. Marry her and let her give birth." All right. So what happens is that she has Dan. Okay. Now, Dan is he's a judge, and from his line comes Samson, who ends up being a judge. Okay. What happens with someone who is a judge? A judge has to have honesty and integrity, right? So as a Jew, we have to have honesty and integrity. And the sages will tell you that when you pass away, one of the first questions that you have to ask was, were you honest in business? Okay, that's an important question. Now, the next one is she became pregnant again, and Rachel's handmaid Bilhah gave a second son. I have been twisted through God's roundabout ways, Naphtuleh, with my sister, and I have also prevailed. She therefore named him Naphtali. This is interesting. So the name Naphtali comes from the root pathal. Pathal means to twist or be crooked, not necessarily like somebody who's crooked, like a crook. Okay, it is twisted. Okay, twisted like challah bread, right? Like bread of life. How do we connect to life through prayer? So basically, that other part of that root in there, there's also the palel. Palel means pray. All right. So that is the root of the word tefillah, prayer. So you can see that what we have to have is it also leads to a certain amount of alacrity. We have to we're ready to go. We're ready to pray. We're ready. And we do it with vigor and excitement, right? Okay. Now, okay, we're halfway through, right? So now, so then there's the whole story of the Dudaim, or the mandrakes as they're oftenly called, and I really wish we could get into that part of the story, because that's another interesting part about not shaming, but it's connected. So then, now here's where all of a sudden Leah, for some reason, she starts praying again, and it says God heard Leah's prayer. She became pregnant and gave birth to a 5th son to Jacob. Leah said, "God has given me my reward," sachar in Hebrew, sachar, because I gave my handmaid to my husband. She named him Issachar. She said, "May his descendants also receive reward," sachar, for studying the Torah. This is also alluded by the name Issachar. In Hebrew, Issachar is Yesachar. Yesachar, and the second, the letter Shin, or a Sin at that point right there, it's actually silent, and it's read as if it was spelled Yiskar. Okay, so Issachar was born. Listen to this. Issachar was born on Shavuot. Shavuot is Pentecost. What is it also known as? We said earlier, Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah. So Issachar was destined to be a studier of Torah. And this coincides with his brother that's born right after. His brother is born right after. His brother is named Zebulun. Verses 19 and 20. Leah became pregnant again, and she bore Jacob a sixth son. God has given me a good endowment. I think we talked about these two brothers a little while back. Maybe it was at the end of the Torah portions, I think, were the blessings of the tribes, with Moses blessing the tribes. All right, Issachar and Zebulun. Issachar is the Torah studier. He devotes his life to studying Torah. Zebulun is the businessman who helps support Issachar in his Torah study so that he doesn't have to work. But this does not preclude Zebulun from studying Torah. He still has to do it, but he does it with the help of his brother Issachar. They support each other. Okay? So, now my husband will make a permanent home, Zabul, with me, because I bore him 6 sons. She named him Zebulun. She said, God has given me a good portion. His descendants will also obtain a good portion in the land of Israel. And they became renowned businessmen. Then there's this interesting thing. All of a sudden there's this part put in here about Dinah, where all of a sudden she gives a daughter. Many people think that Zebulun and Dinah were probably twins. But she has Dinah, and of course Dinah ends up being violated by Shechem. That produces Asnath. Asnath gets put out of the house and sent away, ends up in Egypt. Joseph becomes viceroy in Egypt, and he's actually able to marry Asnath, who is, so he basically still ends up marrying someone within the family, so to speak. So it's very interesting. There's a whole lot of detail on that. I think we taught on that, a little bit on that last year as well. We're trying to get through here. So let's get to the last two. Joseph. All right. So God remembered Rachel, verse 22 of chapter 30. God remembered Rachel. God heard her prayer and opened her womb. This was on Rosh Hashanah. That's why this part of this becomes liturgy during Rosh Hashanah. Remember last week we talked about Hannah. It also happened with Hannah giving birth to Samuel on Rosh Hashanah. Okay? It was decreed in the heavenly academy that Rachel's prayers be answered. An order was given that she have children in the merit of Abraham and Jacob, as well as in the merit of the prayers that Leah, Bilhah, and Zilpah said for her. Isn't that nice? Everyone, the whole barrenness thing, people come praying for each other because they were all like each other. And all 4 of them were sisters, by the way. And it's another one of those things where they all had the same dad, but they had different mothers. That's what's going on. Rachel and Leah had the same mother, Zilpah and Bilhah. And those were different mothers. Rachel also had her own merit for giving Leah her secret sign with Jacob and sparing her humiliation. So she gained merit from that. Okay? So she became pregnant and gave birth to a son. She said, God has gathered in Asaph my humiliation. She named him Joseph, saying, may God add on Yosef for me another son. Now, Yasaph means to gather. And you'll notice as we go to learn about Joseph here pretty soon, what does he do? He ends up not only gathering his brothers at the end of the story all together, bringing the family all back together again, but he gathers in many, many sparks, hidden Jewish souls, bringing them all back in. It's this gathering. So what is the Messiah, the suffering Messiah, Yeshua the suffering Messiah? What does he do? Gathering in sparks, gathering in souls. It's just a beautiful, beautiful picture. No better picture. So, it means to gather. So Rachel said, until now I was humiliated because I was childless. People saw that Esau would take me. In a house without children, strife is inevitable. Now God has gathered in my humiliation and saved me from Esau's clutches. If I break a plate, I will be able to blame it on my baby. I'm not sure what that's about. But then the next one, the last one, is is Benjamin. And Benjamin is, when Rachel dies, she names him Ben-Oni, son of my affliction. But Jacob quickly changes his name to Benjamin, son of my right hand. Instead of son of affliction, son of my right hand. Technically, he was still a son of affliction, right? There was death there. There was an affliction involved. And I'm going to end with all of this right here. So we have our faith. We have our understanding. We cling to God. We have all of these aspects that we go through. We study Torah. We do good in business. We make our connections in life. We have the endowment. We have our reward. We are, I think I missed Gad and Asher. Sorry, let me go back to these real quick. So Gad is success, fearlessness. Gad is the one that led the people into the promised land. They were the mightiest of the warriors. They were fearless. They were, as a matter of fact, they had no fear. They were the ones that invented that bumper sticker that back in the 80s you saw a place, no fear. They were the ones that invented that long before that ever came out. Matter of fact, they were so notorious in battle that it says that when they basically brought their sword down upon their enemy, that they didn't just take the head of their enemy off. They took them off from the head down below the shoulders. I mean, they just took off the top part of their body, and they were the ones that invented the shampoo company, Head and Shoulders. But anyway, but they were fearless, all right? And then there's Asher. Asher was born, and Asher means fortunate, okay? Ashrei, happy is the man. It's part of when we pray that prayer. Happy is the man, right? So you have fearlessness, joy, reward and study. Zebulun. Remember we talked about Zebulun being the business, supporting. Part of that is, what is that? It's the charity, the tzedakah, giving to help support others, right? My friend Beryl Solomon, he'll tell you the story if you go and watch some of his videos. He'll tell you the story. Basically, his rabbi comes to him and says, I want you to give this amount. He's like, but he does, and he ends up being blessed because he obeys and gives that amount, and ends up having that amount to be able to do, and gets blessed even more beyond that. So it's important. So finishing off, let's go back to Benjamin because I missed those two. Sorry about that. But Benjamin is all about the bounce back from affliction to the right hand, from affliction to power, right? To affliction to being in control of our lives. Ultimately, isn't that what the Torah is all about? We've said this recently. When we look at the Torah, when we look at the first 5 books of the Bible, what is it teaching us? It's teaching us self-discipline. That's what we need in life, self-discipline. We need to take that application of strength and put it into our lives. And again, we're like an olive. We get squeezed, and the good stuff, the oil comes out of us, right? The oil flows. Take that affliction. If you look at the Jewish people throughout history, on all the affliction scattered everywhere, where are the Romans? Where are the Greeks? Where are the Egyptians? The Jewish people are still around. Okay? Squeezed, trampled under the dust, yet the dust of the earth. Overcoming affliction. Bouncing back. Yisa Hashem Panav Alecha Yisa Hashem Panav Alecha V'yasem lecha Shalom Yevarechecha Yair Hashem panav alecha Yevarechecha. Yair Hashem panav alecha vikunecha. Yisa Hashem panav alecha. Yisa Hashem panav alecha. V'yasem lecha Shalom.